Welcome back to BLOCKTV, and you're watching Crypto Crunch, where we have the lucky, opportune chance to be joined from Helsinki by finance magnates Rachel McIntosh. How are you, Rachel?
I'm doing fine, Aran. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. So as usual, we asked you to highlight your top stories of the week from your site, and I'd like to kind of go through them one at a time and hear your take. So this first one is like a double, but we'll start with this first one here. Facebook, not the ideal messenger for Libra. That is a quote because Zuckerberg said it. Tell us more.
Right, exactly. So yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg testified before Congress on Libra. And, Aran, I have to say, I think it's so interesting the way that Facebook's attitude has changed since this project was originally announced to now. Like, they're still trying to go ahead with the project, but the whole thing about Facebook having this moving fast and break things, quote unquote, sort of attitude is changing as a result of the things that have happened since they announced Libra.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Mark Zuckerberg went before Congress and said straight up, quote, "I believe that this is something that needs to get built, but I understand that we're not the ideal messenger right now." And of course, referring to some of the unfortunate, data privacy scandals and other difficult things that Facebook has had to deal with over the past few years. However, he did also say, as a sort of a caveat, like if we don't do this, meaning perhaps Libra or some other company based in the U.S., that China will. And I think that's interesting because China basically said the same thing when Libra was launched. They're like, we have to, step up our game here and build something because Facebook is going to fill this market before we have a chance to.
Right, it's like the crypto wars. And then let's kind of, combine this with the second story here, that Facebook's Libra may be backed by many fiat-backed stable coins, right? That was David Marcus saying that a couple of days ago, kind of making us aware that, they're open to, I suppose, different methods of backing. What's your take?
Yeah, I thought this was really interesting and perhaps another piece of evidence that Facebook is perhaps getting a little bit more flexible and isn't trying to charge ahead with this project, kind of like they were when it first started. But basically, David Marcus said that that Libra could possibly look something more like Binance's Venus project, which proposes creating a number of fiat-backed digital currencies according to different countries and different regions. So instead of having one Libra currency that's based on the quote-unquote basket of currencies that nobody knows what they are, it would be like a Libra USD coin and a Libra Great British Pound coin and a Libra Euro coin and stuff like that. So it would be a network of coins that are based off of regional fiat currencies. Marcus also said that this isn't necessarily the preferred method, but I think it's interesting again because Facebook is saying like, well, if we can't make Libra work the way that we wanted to, maybe we can still make it work, some other way that's easier and better for regulators, which I think is probably a healthier attitude.
Yeah, but I'm curious about what you feel. The timing is very curious, right? We know Zuckerberg went in yesterday, and he Marcus made these remarks earlier this week, so that could have something to do with it. But it's like, the way I see it is, you had weeks. I mean, this was announced in June. You had months to say, hey, look, we're even open to something like this. Why do you think that this is happening now?
I honestly think it's because that, first half of 2020 originally expected launch date is not going to happen. And now that we're getting into the fourth quarter of 2019, that's becoming more and more clear. So I think when Facebook originally said, hey, we're going to launch this thing, in the first half of next year, in June, they were anticipating some kind of regulatory, issues, but perhaps nothing on the scale of what has actually followed since the launch of Libra. So I think that, the closer that we're getting to that originally expected launch date, the more that Facebook is saying, okay, well, actually, guys, hold on a second here. I think we have to wait a little bit, and maybe we can change the project and, maybe we can do this. So it's going to be interesting, but personally, I don't think we're going to see a launch within the first half of 2020, if within 2020 at all. I don't know what you think.
I mean, so yesterday, one of the senators, and I'm kind of semi-quoting here, but it was something to the effect of you will launch either way because although you're not waiting for Congress to give you the okay, some regulator, FinCEN, CFTC, whoever it is going to say, hey, your lawyers are going to find a technicality, and then you're going to go through and say, oh, look, it's compliant with regulatory standards. And so, and that I think rings a bit true to most, because I mean, my thoughts are that Libra will launch no matter what. Do you disagree with that?
No, I think that it will eventually launch, but I think that, I kind of hope that Facebook realizes that even if they get the okay from one US regulatory body, that, if they go ahead and launch this network without the consent of Congress and a number of other regulatories within the United States, then that they'll have this network that's live, this currency that people are actually using, that those regulatory bodies could then double down on and really try hard to shut down. And the people that are ultimately going to pay the price for that, I think, are the users of the network. Facebook will suffer its share of blows, but if you're somebody who's using Libra to run your small business, or to send money to family abroad, or et cetera, there are a number of different things. Like, if that system is suddenly seized and shut down by a regulator who's trying really hard to make it not happen anymore, that's probably not going to have the best consequences for the people who are actually using this network.
Absolutely. And I think really, if all else fails, I think this has particularly, if Cambridge Analytica showed people that their privacy is perhaps not really there, maybe this is kind of a step forward in getting people to just understand how important that privacy is. But then moving on to this next story on Tether, you called it Tether's Red Dragon, why USDT is dominating the Chinese markets. Please explain.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a really interesting phenomena that's been happening increasingly since 2017. Basically, during the sweeping set of bans that the Chinese government set against the cryptocurrency industry in late 2017, those bans that we all know and maybe not love, but are at least familiar with at this point. One of those bans was that fiat could no longer be traded for cryptocurrency directly. So basically, but if you have cryptocurrency already, Chinese users are technically legally allowed to trade crypto for crypto, even though the government has blocked access to exchange websites. So if you have cryptocurrency, you can exchange it for another cryptocurrency, but getting that cryptocurrency in the first place is difficult. There's a number of on-ramps that have sort of developed OTC trading desks, little small OTC platforms that exist within WeChat groups and things like that. But, basically, the growth of Tether, which, by the way, since the beginning of the year, the market cap of Tether has more than doubled, has largely been fueled by people who are getting a hold of Tether through these WeChat groups, through these OTC platforms, buying it and then using it sort of instead of fiat currency, instead of the Chinese yuan, to buy Chinese yuan.
To buy Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yes, but using their yuan or in some cases US dollars to buy Tether, and then using that Tether to buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Now, I mean, I don't think that perhaps, and maybe I'm wrong, do you think that this is a purposeful move by the Chinese government with some interest in Tether? That's like full-on conspiracy theory right there.
Whoa, yeah, that is like full-on conspiracy. I don't know. I mean, anything is possible, of course, but I haven't really seen very much interaction between the Chinese government and Tether. Of course, Tether has got a huge PR problem in terms of its transparency. Right. So, it's possible, I'm not going to rule it out, but I don't think, just based on the grounds that there haven't been very many public interactions between Tether and the Chinese government at this point, I don't think that that's that likely. But I think that hopefully, as a result of this New York Attorney General case that's going on with Tether right now, we'll see some more transparency coming out of that company. And as a result of that, perhaps some collaborations could form. We know that the Chinese government is currently working on releasing its own stable coin. I believe the original launch date was November 11th. I have to double check that. So they're working on issuing their own stable coin.
No, absolutely. But it's an interesting, I think, symptom of that law that Tether is, rising in volume, rising in market cap, even though that's not necessarily what people want, but it's essentially a byproduct of that, and there's really no way around it. And then, shifting gears once more, Bittrex to halt crypto trading services in 31 countries. This announcement was made not long ago. What's your take?
Yeah, exactly. So you said it. That's basically the news, is that Bittrex has announced that it's cutting service in 31 countries. Most of them are in Africa, but also Venezuela is one of them, in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And they cited regulatory concerns, regulatory uncertainty specifically. I think that what they meant by that, this is just my own personal take on this, is that, it's not about so much the regulatory uncertainty within these particular countries, although I'm sure there is quite a bit of uncertainty there. But I think it has more to do with Bittrex's relationship with the United States government. I think that, this company earlier this year cut U.S. actors access to 21 different assets. Like, they've been sort of really working to tighten up their regulatory game in the United States. And I think that, perhaps if they're serving these markets that are unregulated, that are, perhaps there's a little bit more illicit activity that cryptocurrency is funding in these particular markets, Bittrex wants to put some distance between itself and those places. So I think that might be the regulatory uncertainty that they were referring to.
But I tend to think that if the company itself released a statement citing that, I'm sure it's not different for everybody, but perhaps could there be something in the works already, or are they just trying to go out of that gray area? They're like, these exchanges aren't able to do it. Binance just moved into the US, so that's not particularly a market. They have Coinbase and Binance. That's going to be the competition at this point. Do you think that that's what's going through the company's mind when making decisions like this?
Right. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that Bittrex is tightening up its regulatory game.
Right. So I'm saying if this is a regulation decision, and we don't want to mess with these countries because we don't have enough users anyway, and in those particular areas, and we just don't want to deal with that, the just in cases, so we might as well cut these down, or is there potentially a different reason?
I think that that's a really sharp insight. I think that, we've got Coinbase, we've got Binance US now. Competition, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game within the US. There is definitely more traders that can be onboarded onto all of these exchanges. There's tons of new markets in the US that are basically totally untapped at this point. But I think that because, within the last year specifically, we've seen from the SEC, from the CFTC, and from a number of other regulatory bodies within the United States that, Bittrex is a US-based exchange, as we know, so is Coinbase, to be fair. But, Bittrex has been around for a long time, and has sort of it's a very American company. Like, they haven't, really, perhaps attempted to market themselves internationally as much as Coinbase has, for example. So I think that, in order to keep that sort of status as like, this is an exchange that's really working hard to be compliant with US laws and wants to stay, keep a strong foothold in US markets, I think that this could be sort of a strategy, yes, in order to perhaps, be a little bit more ahead of the game than Binance and Coinbase in terms of its regulatory status, definitely.
Right. Very curious to see where they end up taking that, because I'm sure there's always a follow-up announcement, right? You'll never get quote unquote bad news, as some might see this as before something else, or maybe a launch of some sort. So, keeping a close eye on that and where that goes in the future. Thank you very much, Rachel McIntosh of Finance Magnates, for joining us for that Crypto Crunch. It was lovely having you on as usual. And for all you folks at home watching at BLOCKTV.com, keep watching for more crypto and blockchain related news.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter